What's going on, everybody? Today, we're talking with Dr. Randall L. Eaton, who has an international reputation as an expert in animal behavior, human evolution, and wildlife conservation. He's taught at numerous colleges, has authored and edited 14 books, and published 115 articles from academia to Sports Illustrated. His film, The Sacred Hunt, has received 11 awards. Dr. Eaton has lectured around the world. He teaches workshops on the sacred hunt, mentors teens and adults in hunting, and is heavily involved in conservation. His book, From Boys to Men of Heart, Hunting as a Rite of Passage, which, by the way, is one of my favorite books of all time, and I've recommended it on this channel, is an amazing collection of information about the importance and power of hunting, our primal connections to it, and its effects on our bodies, our minds, and our spirits. So thank you for sitting down and chatting with us today, Randall.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to have you here. So, all right. So on my YouTube channel, Randall, we talk a lot about historical hunting practices, but also just some interesting hunting stories. Particularly, there's a bunch of stories that my dad tells about his hunting adventures in Canada and elsewhere. Now, in your book, From Boys to Men of Heart, it's not necessarily the focus of the book, but there's some really interesting stories of you sort of out in nature and hunting and so on and so forth. And I was hoping you could tell a couple of those stories to our listeners, particularly when you stumbled upon the African male lion in Nairobi National Park, and when you apologize for, or you apologize to an elk that you didn't kill. So if you don't mind sharing some of these stories.
No, I'd be happy to. Those are two of the better ones in my life for sure. The kind that change your life, you know.
Yeah.
The lion thing was I was over there in Kenya to study cheetahs for my master's thesis. There's never really been done an in-depth study on cheetahs by anybody. And I was there, and I hadn't seen a cheetah yet. I was only been there about a week or a week and a half. But I was out in the Nairobi National Park in a Land Rover, a convertible Land Rover. It had no roof on it, no top. And I saw this beautiful pride of lions come out, and there was this gorgeous male who was sort of leading the group. And they were all heading out. They're getting ready to do their evening hunt. And I got up close to him. I started taking pictures of this big, beautiful male lion, thinking to myself, "Oh boy, I'm going to get these in National Geographic or whatever, you know."
Yeah.
And he was that photogenic. So finally, he gave me several snarls. You know, I got close to him a couple different times. You know, lifting that lip up and showing your teeth and growling a little bit. You know, like saying, "Come on, back off. You know, give me some space here," or whatever. And I ignored him, of course, because all I could think about was getting my pictures. And finally, he jumped on the hood of my Land Rover.
Your roofless, your roofless Land Rover.
Yeah, it was not there. And he's on the hood of the car coming at me. Nothing but a windshield between him and me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't remember what I was afraid to throw it in reverse. I didn't know what to do. Couldn't remember what was behind me. You know, so I was reluctant to try to make a big jerk backwards and maybe throw him, maybe put him in my lap that way. I didn't know. But anyway, fortunately, he jumped off and he let me go. Well, then about a week later, I was following the cheetahs on foot with some notes. And of course, in those days, we didn't have phones and we had no radio contact. We were all alone out there. And I felt this funny feeling that, you know, there's a friend of mine in England wrote a book called How Do You Know Somebody's Staring at the Back of Your Head? And that guy's a brilliant man. But anyway, how did I know that lion was there in the back of my head? I don't know, but I turned around and there he was, that same very lion that had jumped on the hood of my car and warned me ahead of time, you know, leave him alone.
How close was he to you at that point?
I had walked right by him, actually. I had walked like 2 feet away from his feet without even realizing I'd done it, you know.
Wow.
And I walked past him. I turned around, and there he was. I'm thinking, oh, my God, he could have reached out and just grabbed me and munched me, and he didn't lay a hand on me. But immediately I had all these fearful thoughts go through my head, and all of a sudden calm came over me. This is something I've learned over time. There's other things that work in our lives and our own emotions and our own history and our own expectations. And this is one of them. It's one of them when basically I was assured at some level that you're okay, just calm down, take it easy, you know, center, and so on and so forth. And I did that. And when I did that, the lion just did a great big yawn. He's sitting there watching me, and he got yawning like crazy. And I thought, well, I guess I must be out of the clear. So I slowly creeped backwards and finally took off. So anyway, it was a thrilling day, and it was something I'll never forget. And it was a gift too, from him to me, I guess. But
did you have to change your you have to change your pants, Randall?
You know, I didn't, but it's a wonder. It's a wonder I didn't really. No kidding. Yeah. wow. It's one of those days you were just sure this is it. And it wasn't. I was blessed.
Yeah. You were going to talk about the elk that you apologized to
the
for
elk,
not killing.
Right, sure. Yes. Well, as you know, I went to a lot of effort, not just a little bit of effort, but a lot of effort for several years to really dig into Lakota. That's the tribe Lakota. Lakota tribal traditions, which are very similar to almost all the other tribes in North America. And I learned to participate in sweat lodges. I learned to pray. I learned to attract clouds, believe it or not, actually attract rain clouds to my garden south of Reno with prayer. I started learning a lot of things about interacting with nature over time, and it worked. And I had a couple of different birthdays up at Tahoe when it started to rain, and I went and prayed to the rain spirit, and the rain stopped. I mean, I've had those kinds of experiences not just once or twice, but many times in my life now since then. Anyway, what were we talking about?
Yeah, about the elk.
Oh, yeah, about the elk. So anyway, I finally got to a point to where I learned from the Lakota themselves and the medicine man exactly how they prepared for a hunt. And he took me through it, you know, I mean, step by step. You know, you spend a week in pure self-purification. All the negativity that you've ever held or still hold in you for any reason whatsoever, you know, you got to be conscious of it, and you got to release it, and you got to bless that person or whatever, you know, was involved. You got to, you know, get free of all this garbage that's inside of you that you accumulate over time. Sure. And that's how you prepare for a hunt. And at the same time that you're preparing for going through an internal cleansing process, you're also praying to the Great Spirit to grant you, and also as the spirit of the elk nation, or in this case, the elk nation or the deer nation, whatever you're hunting, you pray to the spirit of that nation to please grant you one of these animals, that you will honor it in its death, and that you will respect it, and you will be appreciative, and you will be thankful. And you do that. You spend a week doing that. I did that for a week. I was out in the field a few seconds. I mean, seconds, not minutes, a few seconds with my Indian friend on his four-wheeler. And there was suddenly 35 elk right in front of us, all stretched out in a great big herd with a great big monarch bull at the lead. Nice. I'd been on his property probably 10 times up to that day and never seen an elk. Here I was out on my first elk hunt after doing my preparatory Native American preparation for the hunt, and there were 35 of them with a monarch bull at the lead. At the very back of the herd was another bull, not a monarch bull, but a big full-grown, fully adult bull with a 4-point on each side. And he just stood there and stared at me. The rest of the elk marched over this hill and left him behind. And he stayed there, stood there, and with his head turned sideways, staring me right in the face. And he did not move an inch. And I knew that he would basically was a gift to me. I knew it without any doubt whatsoever. Now, had I needed food for my family, I would have taken his life that day. And I was prepared to do it, but I didn't really need it. I was so blown away by what I'd seen, by what I observed and what I practiced, and the fact that it worked so well. Sure. I mean, it's mind blowing. It's beautiful, you know. Yeah. And here it was, a whole other reality that basically I was actually experiencing. Well, finally, I put my rifle down, and he still stood there, that elk, broadside, gave me the perfect shot. And my Indian friend says to me, Dave's his name. He says, shoot, take him, he's yours. Take him, he's yours. And he meant that literally, meaning he belongs to you. You know, this is not a contest. You know, this is the one you prayed for. And there he is. And I said, no, I'm not going to take him. I don't need him. And then he said, we're going to have to do a ceremony for that elk in the morning. And I laughed. I said, what do you mean do a ceremony? I didn't take him. He said, yeah, you don't understand. That elk offered himself to you and you didn't take him, and now you have to apologize. That's how deep this Native American tradition runs. You see what I'm saying? It's so different than ours. It's unbelievable. It's like they're not out there just, you know, they're not hiding. They're not wearing camos. They're not in blinds. They're not doing any of that stuff. And so I wondered, you know, I finally learned how they do it. You know, they prepare themselves spiritually is what they do. They do the immense self-cleansing process, and also, of course, making commitments to the spirit of the elk nation and the spirit of the deer nation and others along the way, that how you will honor that animal in its death, you know, among all the people that you live with, and so on and so forth. So it was an extremely important lesson for me. It told me that, yes, there really is something to what these Native people are doing and have been doing for centuries, thousands of years, millennia. And all I can say is it changed my life, and I'm thankful for it to this day.
Yeah, that's awesome. When I originally had read that story, I think it really resonated with me. I think it resonated with probably anybody who read it. It's pretty fascinating. I think it's an awesome angle. It's an awesome
Yeah.
way of looking at things. Yeah.
Well, it's something that happens every day among those people all over this continent, and has for centuries.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I suppose our more modern style of hunting is definitely out of pace with much of those
Right.
traditional
Sure.
practices.
Yeah. No kidding.
So when I started my YouTube channel, I was primarily making content about the historical accuracy of a very popular video game called Red Dead Redemption 2, which was set in the American West during the 1890s. So players spent a lot of their time hunting, fishing, canoeing, camping, sort of like exploring nature in the game. And as my videos on the game became more popular and my audience started to grow and get a little bit larger, I noticed that a lot of comments started popping up under the videos of folks sort of lamenting how they wish they lived back then and they could do these activities in real life. And so this kind of prompted me to begin making outdoor videos, showing folks how they could kind of get out into nature. You could have some adventures, connect with the real natural world. And in your book, you mentioned something called nature deficit disorder. And I was wondering if you don't mind explaining what that is and sort of how it's affecting people today.
Well, it's a summary term, basically, of the consequences that develop in our lives because we are deficit in terms of our connection with nature and wild things. And it changes the way we look at reality. It changes the way we think, the way we feel. It changes the way we eat. When you lived when you walk the wild path and you sit down and have dinner with your family, you start teaching your boy who's growing up, to honor the creature that you're eating now and to thank him in the spirit of his nation, to be grateful, if nothing else. Now I'm saying that's not news. It's just, that's not new, obviously, just to Native Americans. That's something anybody can take up at any time, and many people do in their own ways, being grateful and being thankful and thanking the spirit of that animal and blessing it and knowing that it's a gift to you, a gift from the Great Spirit, as the natives would say. The favorite saying of the Lakota Sioux is, "Oh, Matakwayasin, oh, Matakwayasin." That means I'm related to all things. All things are my relation. That's their holy phrase, okay, that they use invariably in all situations and throughout every walk of their life. Oh, Matakwayasin. It's a reminder that I am connected with all things and all things are connected to me. We are all related. We are all one. Yeah.
That seems like it would humble and maybe sort of tamp the ego down a little bit, I would imagine.
No doubt. There's no doubt about it. It brings me to tears when you said that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of a lot of what's going on. Honestly, I think, when we talk about nature deficit disorder, which I completely agree with you on that, and I see it constantly, particularly in my students, as years have passed and they become really, sort of generations become less connected with nature. But it's that, and I think you actually mentioned it in your book, and I think it's one of the portions I highlighted where you were talking about a lot of young people and even adults have gotten to the point where they kind of, how do I put it? I'm trying to remember how you phrase it, but something about they come to kind of get used to the idea of the unlivingness of things.
Right.
That almost only humans are apparently the only living creatures around us in existence. And we just kind of go through life assuming that everything else is just, very much not alive. And I think that probably hurts us in numerous ways, but particularly I think it probably does wonders at expanding the human ego.
Yes, no doubt. Well, that's where we find ourselves. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in this great, almost desperate loneliness, a sense of loneliness, that isn't real, but because we're separated so much from nature and from everyday experiences in nature that we are basically, in my opinion, are lost.
Yeah.
We're disconnected. We're floating around without a real disconnection from our heart to all that is, including the Creator and the earth and all the nature spirits and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's a terrible thing to give up without even realizing that you've lost it. Oh my God.
No, definitely.
Such a sad thing. Well, one of the rules for sort of changing all that is to encourage people to participate directly in the food chain. You know, that's what connects you. Once you realize that your sustenance comes from nature, from living things that die that you might live. When you feel that at a deep level, it's something you can never walk away from. That will be with you the rest of your life. If you never hunted again or fished again or anything else, it's still going to be part of you. You know, that awareness.
Yep. And being part of that process of
food
procurement. Yeah.
Yep. No kidding. Yeah. So shit.
So,
and boy, it evokes gratitude galore is all you can say. You know, my gosh, some of my greatest experiences have come from animals saying thank you at one level or another. You know.
Yep.
I don't know if I can say this fair enough, but I was out hunting with my ex-wife on our farm in central Illinois. It was an excellent pheasant hunting area. And she'd done a lot of trap shooting with me, and she was pretty good with a 20 gauge automatic. And this flock of quail suddenly took off. She fired, and we went over and picked up a bird, but it wasn't a quail. There had been a short-eared owl in the cover with the quail, the covey of quail. And when the quail took off, she thought the owl was one of them because they're almost the same size anyway. Those short-eared owls are tiny.
Sure.
And she mistakenly shot an owl, and she felt terrible about it. And the owl looked like it was pretty much cooked, you know, meaning dead. It wasn't, but he was still alive. And I put him in my game bag in the back of my jacket. And we hunted the rest of the day. And we got back to my hometown that night in the evening, and I took sticking the pheasants out of my game bag, and there was that little owl still in there, still alive, you know.
Yeah.
Which I was surprised at. And he hopped on the floor of my parents' back porch, and he stayed there. He popped his beak at me a few times as if to say, leave me alone or something. In the morning, I came down to go hunting again before sunrise, and there he was on the back porch looking pretty good, you know. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wow, I don't know how I survived being shot and then, you know, riding with a bunch of dead birds, you know, clogged in the back of your coat. That whole thing went through it all and survived it. So I took him back down and released him close to where we had shot him. Then I hunted ducks all day on the pond. Didn't see a bird, or didn't see one close anyway. I gathered up my decoys and my gun. I was walking away from the pond, and something started flying around my head. Guess what it was?
The owl.
It was that short-eared owl. Yep. He was flying within 6 to 8 feet of my head in circles around and around and around. And I can't hide it. You know, I come to tears to this day. I realized that he was saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. I swear to God. And all I can say is thank you. You know, it's just like I've had too many experiences like that in life where there's that connection, which is real and it's beautiful and it's profound. And you just, you know, I could say you weep out of a sense of gratitude.
Yeah,
that's what it is. It's gratitude. Sorry, I get so.
No,
sorry.
No, I for what it's worth, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying. I've had we go on fishing trips. My dad and I, we go on some fishing trips up to northern Canada and some of my friends. We've been doing it for a very long time, since I was a kid. I remember one time my dad and I were on this point at this place we named the Gauntlet. And it was the very last day of a week-long trip. It was just him and I. And we decided to go out together that day instead of just going out with, you know, my friends or whatever, so we could kind of connect and bond. And I remember we were basically wrapping up. We're getting ready to leave. And we just kind of stopped and we said, you know what? Let's do one more cast to acknowledge that this is really the final cast of the trip. And let's just send it out there and see what the universe, see what nature provides. And my dad casted his pole out there and started reeling it in, and he caught just a monster northern pike. It was the biggest pike of the entire trip. When he brought it in, it was bizarre. We just laughed hysterically, you know, out of gratitude with, you know, how absolutely incredible is it that we vocalized it out loud. This is the final cast. Let this be a meaningful cast. Let come what may. And it was just amazing, you know, and him and I being able to share that experience in that way where it was almost having a conversation with nature, like, hey, we're going to make this one meaningful. If you want to chime in, that would be great. And how it unfolded, it was, I don't know, it's just amazing. And having those memories to me changes things. It's never that, you know, you're pitted against nature. It's more of
Right.
when you make that intention to work with nature in a way.
Exactly.
And when you see it answer you, nature kind of says, hey, by the way, I'm listening. This is a gift for you and your father. It was just kind of a neat experience of chuckling at how amazing nature can be when you connect with it on a level of sort of friendship and interconnectedness, I guess is maybe how I'd put it.
Exactly.
But anyway,
I hear you.
A bunch of those. But I loved your owl story. That's really neat. Having that owl thank you in that way. So another question for you. In chapter 13 of your book, it's titled Awakening Instincts. And you talk about hunting being an instinct rather than a recreational hobby of some sort. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about this. And if you wouldn't mind touching on your story of shooting a sparrow and sort of what that taught you when you were a boy and your thoughts on sort of that frantic reaction we see today from parents and society who really seem to discourage this instinctual behavior.
Right. Boy, well, as far as the sparrow goes, I found this out over the years, speaking to hunter organizations in Canada and the United States and in Europe too, where the vast majority of at least men, these are mature men, who attended these meetings where I spoke, they had all taken up hunting. Almost all of them had taken up some kind of hunting at a very young age. It wasn't legitimate hunting, meaning you had to get a license, hunting license. Well, I don't mean that, but they were finding some way to basically go through the motions of hunting, whether it was with a BB gun or a pellet gun or a bow and arrow or whatever it was. Everybody seemed, not everybody, but the majority of hunters I ever talked with who've been lifelong hunters had been out there at the age of 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever, basically being little hunters, even if they'd never been hunting with anybody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I shot that sparrow when I was 6, I'd never gone hunting with my grandfathers, ever. I'd never even thought about it. This is all coming out of me spontaneously, to use my brother's BB gun and to go down to the end of the street early in the morning when the sun had just come up in the summertime and the grain trucks are going by down to the elevator and all that, and taking a shot at that sparrow and then realizing I hit him. And then I felt bad because I realized I hurt him, and I felt bad for a week,
Yeah.
And I regret to this day that I'd done that, to tell you the truth. And I talked about this to thousands of men so far. They all shaking their heads. Yeah. Oh yeah. They had similar experiences. They had a wake up call. In other words, you're following the basic instinct, the basic program, to go out and get the animal, pursue it or whatever. And then when you do, it's like, wow, that's a profound experience. You have regrets about it, and almost all the guys there, they didn't show it or reveal it. I could feel their tears. I could feel that those boyhood tears are still in their body, so to speak, still in their heart or whatever. And boy, so on the one hand, that speaks for what? An instinct, a literal instinct, that's waking up within us at a very young age. I was 6 years old, There I was actually successfully killing a sparrow, a little tiny sparrow with a BB gun. I mean, it's amazing that you could do that at 6 years of age, but I did. And then I felt terrible about it because if he fell down in the gutter and he wasn't dead yet and I couldn't rescue him and I couldn't kill him, there was nothing I could do except I would go back and ponder what I had just done, And at one level, I basically was not conscious of it, but I was sort of at one level verging on forgiveness, asking for forgiveness, for what I had just done. I felt guilty about it. I felt wrong about it. And I don't think that's bad. I think that's good. And I think that, just because you have an impulse to do something doesn't mean that justifies doing it. It's not that simple, So, and we all know that. And that's one reason that we care about, like people like you and I care about how we go about doing these things and how the influence that we have on other people in the process and how we can possibly help wake them up to the point to where they feel connected to nature and they see nature as benevolent, as the fact that, the great spirit's there looking after us, whether we know it or not. O Matakliasan is back to that Lakota Sioux, the Lakota Sioux phrase, O Matakliasan, I'm related to all things are my relation. Well, that's what comes out of those basic instinct drives that take over a little boy. And what comes out of that is something ultimately very positive. Because then you don't kill lightly. It's not something you just do as a mild entertainment. You know what I mean? You don't go out and just shoot something to shoot it. You know what I mean? That's extremely rare. And if while you're growing up or even when you're older, you see that happen, it bothers you. It bothers you deeply.
Yeah.
You know, you see somebody just takes a pop shot at whatever it is and is willing to kill for the thrill of it. You know, there's somehow or another that steps on the wrong side of things. You know. And it's foreign territory to a true hunter. A true hunter's, if he's going to take an animal's life, he's going to do it with respect and with gratitude, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that those are the most fundamental lessons you can get in life.
Yeah, I've noticed in my classes when actually even this week I have a couple classes that we're talking sort of about early humans and about the division of labor by sex. So, you have men doing a lot of the hunting and fighting and so on, and women doing a lot of the gathering, and sort of talking about, even using, for what it's worth, a couple studies you cited in your book, which I thought were fascinating, that connect with that instinct part. You mentioned in your book a couple different studies. One was about boys beginning to dream about large predators at a particular age, while girls begin dreaming about snakes and spiders, which I always thought was really fascinating. Because obviously that primal connection to, you can't flip a switch and undo hundreds of thousands of years of sort of, human activity and say, oh, well, men are they don't have to be hunters. Like, well, the problem with that is that we're sort of ingrained to do that. I mean, in many ways, it's in our genetic memory. It's in this blueprint, and it pops up, amongst boys having these particular dreams in the same way that snakes and spiders would have been a threat to women who were gathering, right?
Exactly. And yeah.
You bring up another study that I thought was great. Was it was about boys spontaneously throwing rocks at a predictable age and basically fashioning weapons for hunting and for defense, but again, not girls not engaging in that. And then even killing animals in what's the term, spontaneously killing animals at a particular age as well, and girls don't spontaneously kill animals. And and I think it's neat having, you see that stuff coming out, and I think we tend to panic today, but in many ways, when you think of it as an instinct, it's more about, oh, well, wait a minute. There's nothing wrong with you, right? Like that's, it's not, you don't need to send your kid to counseling because these instincts begin manifesting themselves in picking up stones and sticks and wanting to, or shooting a sparrow with a BB gun. I'm pretty sure that a lot of men have had that experience. When I talk about it, even in my class, for what it's worth, Randall, I ask the male students to say, does anybody have any stories where they remember as a boy, that first memory of spontaneously killing an animal, basically. And almost all of them have a story about that, whether it's shooting a bird with a BB gun, shooting a rabbit with a slingshot, whatever that would be. And it's amazing how all of them are so, they feel such guilt for it. It's pretty amazing. Sure. And you talk about it a lot in your book, but that idea of taking life creates empathy rather than people thinking you're sort of glorifying the violence of it. Like, it's not about violence. It's about everything else, all the good stuff. On that note, I should ask you, do you mind just briefly telling people about some of the success that these hunting and outdoor programs have had for troubled boys? I think it's pretty interesting, and I don't think a lot of people know about it.
I'm afraid that they don't. And we certainly had it going for a while. I had a partner in Wyoming who was basically doing the field work on it because he'd read my stuff and been to some conferences I held and some speeches I gave, and we became good friends and so on and so forth. And he grew up hunting with Indians, actually, in Wyoming. And he already had a deep respect for wildlife and for life in general, and also for hunting. He didn't take it lightly. He took it seriously. And he ended up influencing 5 states around Wyoming, including Wyoming. And it was this all goes back to another friend of mine who worked with boys who got in trouble in southern Idaho. And he would take those boys out for 2 weeks at a time to survive in the wilderness. And I mean survive. They didn't take food along to survive on. They had to survive on whatever they found out or dug up or killed or trapped or whatever, you know. They were on their own. And as far as food goes, there wasn't anybody coming out with rescue trucks or, you know, flying somewhere or dropping stuff from helicopters. It wasn't like that. If they ate something because they caught it or killed it, you know, and that's the way it was. And you talk about turnarounds and attitudes, my Lord. These kids would have a totally different attitude once they finished a 2-week wilderness survival course in which they had to feed themselves off of nature. They talk about, you're talking about radical revolution internally in those young men. And it was so successful in turning their lives around and getting them on the right track that there was a time there in the history of this program when it was going strong, when single judges in Denver were taking 200 boys at one time and basically tell them they had to participate in one of these field survival courses, you know? Yeah. And there was some point when there was actually several thousand coming out of Colorado. And then my friend who had the base program in Wyoming, he had at that time 5 states surrounding him with guys doing the same programs for wayward youth. And all I can tell you is that I don't think there's anything been more successful than those programs. I remember my friend who ran the one in Idaho had a real difficult young man on his trip one day. And the young man finally killed a groundhog, a marmot, and it died in his hands. Mm-hmm. And he cried and he wept.
Yeah.
And he realized that animal died for his benefit, and he ate it and so on, but it changed his life. You know, it turned everything around for him. He was filled with hate up to that point. He was filled with anger. He was frustrated with life. He found no meaning in life, and all of a sudden, this groundhog who died in his lap and which he ate changed his life.
Yeah.
And that's the power of this kind of experience that I'm talking about here. It's nothing to take lightly. It's something that can be life-changing in the very best sense of the word. Sure. Transformative. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Now, to sort of put the man in man versus history here, I read a lot of books on sort of the idea of masculinity, sort of historically in particular. You know, we're not talking about machoism or any of that, but rather that deep exploration of what it means to be a mature masculine man, and why a lot of men in the modern world are sort of struggling to find purpose, meaning, contentment, and peace. So, you know, what factors do you think are leading to this crisis of masculinity, and what are your thoughts on any ideas on how people can remedy this?
Boy, that's a good question. You know, I immediately go back to my own experience with the Native people, you know, mm-hmm. The Native Americans, and the things I learned going to the sweat lodges and listening to what they had to say and to their prayers and to their point of reference of reverence, really, for life and for the Great Spirit and for the connectedness of all life. It's those values that they reflect and they hold on to dearly, and they will never let go of, and they're the core of their existence, socially and culturally. And all I can say is if every man in our world had similar experience growing up to what those guys had, it'd be a different world. I think you know that too.
Yeah,
I know it and you know it. And the question is how to really state it properly so someone could even consider the possibility that, you know, growing up hunting and fishing could change your life and make you a far better person to live on this planet than to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I think the more you can get people out into nature and getting them part of nature and learning those lessons, as far as, you know, in respecting it and being grateful for it, but also in taking life.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
Learning the value of life.
Imagine that we consider ourselves educated, but how many seriously, have you known in your life that ever went to a slaughterhouse or ever observed an animal getting killed even on the farm, you know, for food?
Almost none.
It's extremely rare, you know, it's extremely rare. And it happened to me because I didn't expect it, but I was working for the game departments in Missouri when I was in graduate school there. During the hunting season, I was assigned to this post, which was a local slaughterhouse, where the hunters would bring their deer. Mm-hmm. and we'd measure the deer and fill out forms and do that kind of stuff, the kind of stuff that a game department does. And for 3 days, I was in this little tiny slaughterhouse watching pigs die and cows die and so on. And it blew my mind. I thought, oh my God, I had no idea that there was that much suffering going on among those animals, but it's immense.
Yeah.
It's not minor at all. It's horrible. It's heart wrenching. It makes me want to cry when I think about it.
Yeah.
That changed my life.
It's amazing.
So the question I have for people is, if you want your son to grow up connected to life and caring about life, how about you and your family go visit a slaughterhouse? Then maybe you'll have a different point of view when you eat that steak or that hamburger the next time you eat one. Maybe you'll have a different point of view about what these animals go through so that we can survive and live our happy lives, you know.
Yeah.
So if we don't participate in the food chain, how can we be an appropriate defender of it? I don't know. I don't know how we can ever even talk about ecology if we don't even never seen an animal die that feeds us, you know. Even if you didn't kill it yourself, the point is you ought to at least observe what happens when this animal goes through this. It's not like joy for them. It's suffering. I've watched pigs. Pigs are the worst. They suffer for so long when we kill them. Mm-hmm. It's just it makes my heart tremble. I can't help it.
Yeah.
But anyway, may that be. If we were going to be real educators, you know, we would make sure that our kids know what these things are like. I even have Indians tell me that they're teenagers who don't know where a hamburger comes from. They have no idea that the cows out in those fields actually die so they can make hamburgers so these guys can eat them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's no connection. There's no awareness. There's no flow of energy that leads to awareness and consciousness and love.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. You know, in your book, you write a lot about the importance of rites of passage, which are used to usher boys into manhood, the lack of which is something I think we both agree definitely impacts a lot of men today. Now, I'm curious, what do we do? And this is something I've really spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I really am curious to pick your brain here, but what do we do with uninitiated adult males today? So like, can they be ushered into proper sort of proper mature masculinity through rites of passage? And if so, like, what would that look like? Sorry, a lot of questions there.
Well,
but, yeah.
I agree with you. You're basically your concept, which is that it ought to be part of our life learning process, not just, you know, learning how to do the ABCs and hold down a job.
Sure. Yeah.
It ought to be part of the growing. Rites of passage ought to be a part of every young man's life, you know, and it's not trivial, but it's significant and it's serious and it's life changing and it's life shaping and it's pro-life, you know. It's just so basic and so wonderful, and that's why other societies do it to this day.
Yeah.
And we have a lot to learn from them. Absolutely. And I agree that would change our world. That would change our world right there. If part of growing up wasn't just going to school and graduating from grade school or whatever, but actually participating in these rites of passage, it would be a different world right now. We'd be living in a different world.
Yeah. Do you think that we can take uninitiated adult men and create some sort of rite of passage that could still be transformative, even though they aren't, you know, from between 9 and 21, like the standard rites of passage have been? Is there something we can do? I have no doubt that you can. Yeah. Yeah. I have no doubt in my mind whatsoever. It's just me. I was over 40 when that elk stood there waiting for me to take his life, you know. Yeah. And I didn't do it, but you know, it's like my Indian friend said to me, we'll have to do a ceremony for that elk in the morning. And I laughed. Did I tell you that? Yeah. And I laughed. I said, what do you mean? I didn't take him. He says, you don't understand. That elk offered himself to you and you didn't take him. Now you have to apologize. It's insulting. Isn't that something? Yeah. No, it's an amazing way of looking at it. So do you think it could be and things... See, that's the level of connection that those Native people have, but we don't have. Yeah. We don't recognize that we're all in this together, you know. It's one you can call it one big organism, one earth, one whatever, but we're all in this together, you know, and there's no other way. There's just no other way you can say it. There's no other possibility even. Yeah. So would you say that sort of getting out into nature in a sort of open-minded, respectful way to really try to bond with it is maybe one of the ways that we can move sort of men?
Oh, I have no
towards
doubt.
that?
I have no doubt whatsoever that it would change our life and our world overnight. Well, maybe not overnight, but very soon after that.
Yeah. Randall,
Yeah.
would you see it, just to follow up on this, because like I said, I'm personally very curious on it. If you were to design some sort of ritualistic rites of passage for people who are already adults,
Right.
you know, I know we talked about, you know, we'd have a nature component and so on and so forth. Like, is there anything you'd add to that as far as like, if you could envision like what that would look like to take these men who are kind of lost and kind of move them along that path?
Right. Well, I've been part of the programs where the young teenagers, you know, were getting themselves in trouble, went through this survival experience in the wild and came out different human beings, really. So I can see how it works. A lot of these guys were basically young men. You know, the average age of them was probably 17, 18, something like that. But I can see it working for guys who are 35 or 40, no problem whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, all we basically have to do is package this in some way, probably make some outstanding film about it to help, you know, attract the participants. But I think it can be done, and I think it's realistic. I'd love to see you do it. I'd love to help you do it if I can.
Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing. I'd love to bounce around some ideas sometime on that. Now, a good friend of mine who read and loved your book, by the way, his name's Cyber. He had a sort of a two-part question he wanted me to pass along. And him and I have sat down and talked about your book quite a bit and explored a lot of the ideas in it. And so I'll give you one question at a time. So his first question is hunting and the taking of an animal's life a necessary component of rites of passage?
Okay, can you repeat that last sentence? You're getting
Sure.
kind of soft on the sound. I'm losing some of it.
No problem. No problem. So he asks,
Okay.
Is hunting and the taking of an animal's life a necessary component of rites of passage?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind that it is. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. That's what we had talked about. We agreed on that you have to, you know, it has to be transformational, right? It can't just be I'm turning over a new leaf and heading out into the woods and photographing things. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it lacks the visceral sort of transformative effect, I guess, is kind of how we viewed it. Sort of seeing the light, if you will, go out of the animal's eyes and kind of understanding.
Oh, absolutely. And one comes out of those kinds of experiences knowing at a deep level that your spirit is connected with the spirit of that animal who died that you might live, you know. And what could be more fundamental than that? You talk about ecology. That's the basis of ecology in every sense of the word.
So the second part of this question that he has is, what other components are necessary for rites of passage to be effective? So in your book, you mentioned vision quests, sort of being alone in nature, facing hardships. Are those things part of the historical rites of passage, or is there anything else?
Yes, I think they are. They have been among most of the tribes in North America and many societies beyond our boundaries too. Yes, I think that is part of it for sure.
Okay, so vision quests. I know you mentioned that as part of a lot of Native American rites of passage. Does that go beyond just even Native Americans? Is that something that a lot of other groups?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
There's equivalent. There are equivalent learning experiences and experiential paths among other cultures for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people ask me about, you know, with hunting as a rite of passage, that I think a lot of people think of it simply as if you can take a large animal's life, then you show that you're capable of supporting a family. And I think that's partially true, you know, historically speaking. But I think a lot of people think that that's all there is to the rites of passage, that it's when you become a certain age, you can take an animal's life.
Yeah.
In my own teaching and things like that, I try to explain that, well, it's more than just the taking of the animal's life. There's a process, right? And it starts,
sure,
you know, at roughly 9 years old, maybe earlier, up to about 21, is sort of that path. And in many ways, maybe that hunting is kind of the capstone to that, or maybe an ongoing component of it, but it's not a one and done, you're a man type thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw a little something out here for you, whatever it's worth.
Yeah, please
I
do.
was down on our farm on the Sangamon River in central Illinois, hunting ducks in the morning, and the sun had not come up yet. I'd put out my decoys, and I was alone. And I heard some barking, and I turned around, and over the levee came 5 dogs, black dogs, chasing a deer. And the deer was ahead of them, of course, and the deer ran right up behind my blind and stood there panting. Its chest was heaving back and forth, and his tongue was hanging out of his mouth. He'd been fleeing from these wild dogs. And I could have taken his life, maybe I had the sense even at one time that he was sort of asking me to, sort of like, can you help me out here or something?
Yeah.
But anyway, he stood there for the longest time doing the heavy breathing, and then the dogs got closer and closer, and he took off running, the deer did. Then the dogs stopped right behind my blind. You know, so there's 6 of them, I think, and they all stared right at me. I mean, you talk about being seen.
Sure.
And I could have shot them too. You see what I mean?
Yep.
I could have shot the deer and taken the deer home. I could have shot the dogs and never had to fool with them again and say, well, you shouldn't be taking my deer, so take this. That's not what I did. I let the dogs go on chasing the deer after the deer ran away.
And these were wild. These were wild dogs.
These were wild dogs, and believe it or not, they exist all up and down the entire Mississippi basin. They have for generations. And a friend of mine in Georgia at the University in the Wildlife Department there where I taught studied them for many years, and he's right. I mean, these things are for real. And farmers know about them too. The farmers around our area told me about them. I never really took them seriously. I just figured these were dogs. Well, they're not just dogs. They're feral dogs. They've been feral for generations, and they run in packs and they hunt deer. And they're like a wolf pack. They've taken over where the wolf packs used to the role they used to play.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Now it's feral dogs. Isn't that wild?
Yeah,
but I'll never forget that day when they stared me in the eyes and I stared them in the eyes, and I didn't have any sense whatsoever of competing with them. I had no sense of regret or resentment towards them whatsoever. I admired them just as I admired the deer,
Yeah.
And but that was a wake up call that day for me. And then I found out that I'd seen many signs of this of canids, of dogs. I figured they were dogs, domestic dogs, chasing deer. And I found several times on our farm a dead deer, and I'd see dog tracks everywhere. And I just assumed, well, these are domestic dogs, but they're not. They're feral. They're like a wild species. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
It
is.
In some ways, it gives me a lot of hope. I like knowing that's out there in a weird way. That
Exactly.
kind of untamed nature is still sort of among us. You just have to know where to look.
Exactly. I hear you.
Very cool.
It makes me happy too, and I've written poems about it and the whole thing about those dogs, sitting under a fine pecan tree on that faraway river. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, Randall, I am out of questions. I wish I had more because I love chatting with you. But I'm sure I'm going to come up with more. Did you have anything you wanted to anything else you wanted to say?
The only thing I would say is now that I've learned more about you and your interests, because of our conversation today.
Sure. All
I can say is that maybe we should put our heads together and see what we can come up with that could actually be a rite of passage, for adult males in our culture.
I would absolutely love that. That would be an honor.
Yeah. I think that would be a worthy goal. Maybe we can work on that together. I appreciate that too.
Yeah. I think a lot. I have my first child coming, so I'm pretty stoked about it. And it's a boy, and he's coming in a couple months. And I've been doing a lot of reading on kind of thinking about in many ways thinking about getting to the point that I can sort of do what I can to take him through rites of passage. And I know that for part of it, it's as a father, it's not even my role. I got to kind of hand him off to to an elder, if you will, for some of these components of that rite of passage. But I think a lot about many of the people I know and people I come across, a lot of men who certainly are well beyond the 9 to 21 range and who did not have any sort of experience like that. And I think, I hate the idea that they're sort of left on their own to just figure things out. And I wish in many ways that there could be some sort of, program, some sort of something that could help guide them, so they're not just wandering around on their own saying, oh, I'm supposed to figure this out, and
right.
that's what I've really been trying to figure out myself on how to kind of usher some fellow men through something like that, so they can have a lot of the experiences that I think people like you and people like me and some other people were privileged enough to grow up having those experiences. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to do it yet, but I'm definitely trying to figure it out. And I think, as you said, I think it would it could change the world. If you can change
no doubt in
it.
my mind. Yeah. And while you were talking, I was listening on one thing and watching that little short-eared owl flying around my head as I was walking out of the duck line when sundown came.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can tell you is that to this day, that's an inspiration in my life. That poor little owl. It's a wonder he survived that horrible day in his life.
Yep.
But he did. And when it was over, when he was released back into his environment, he came to say thank you.
Yeah.
And it makes me cry.
No, it's amazing. The impact. Yeah, the impact that it has on you, Randall, but also being able to share that story and for other people to hear it. It's another one of those examples of understanding that it is not about the unlivingness of things, but rather that all these things are very much alive, and we can interact with them on a profound level, and they can interact with us on a profound level if you're open to it.
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Yeah.
Very cool.
Animals are our teachers, and that's another thing that we haven't touched on, but basically that's part of the rite of passage process is, and as I think because that I've spent a lot of time studying orca whales. You talk about a model creature. I'm going to tell you real quickly. For example,
please.
What's the speed? The only species that we know of on the planet Earth in which females are smaller than males, but they govern their societies? Orca whale.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What species out there behaves with humans the way we would maybe? Well, let me put it this way: the native people of the Pacific Northwest, from the Seattle area on up to the Arctic Circle. Okay, these are native peoples all along the coastlines who've been hunting and fishing and sealing with orca whales day in and day out for thousands of years, not a few years, not a few hundred, but thousands. Okay. And this is what they all have to say. It's an amazing thing, but it's mind-boggling. They all say this: they never attacked us till we attacked them. I'm talking about the orca whales now.
Yeah.
Got to realize that the humans and the orcas are indirectly, whether they know it or not, indirectly competing for the same resources. Okay.
Yep.
Whether it's salmon or whether it's seals or whatever it is, or even whales, because orcas also kill giant whales. But the Native Americans say they never attacked us till we attacked them. Then they attacked us back. But now get this: but only the actual culprits of our society who had attacked them.
Yeah.
In other words, if two men went out, and this happened in the tribe in southern British Columbia where I worked, these two men went out and broke the rules, the taboo. There was a taboo on harming the orca whales, and you can see why.
Sure.
They're awesome predators, but these two men went out and killed an orca, and I think they thought that was going to earn them a lot of social power or something. Well, the orcas showed up not long after that, and those two men were out in a canoe with a third man who didn't participate in the killing of the orca. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The orcas capsized the canoe, killed the two men who participated in the killing of an orca, and pushed the third man to shore.
That's amazing. That's wild.
It is amazing, but those are the kind of creatures they are. They're giant dolphins. They're the rulers of their world. Here they are breaking all the rules. The females are smaller, but they're in charge. Now, wait a minute. See what I mean?
Sure. I have to mention it too, because I can't remember if you mentioned this in a book or in your book or one of the interviews or something, but is there because first of all, maybe we should inform people too that how, all the work you've I don't know how many decades you've worked with orcas as well, specifically.
Oh,
but
yes.
I remember there
was
years,
yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a story. I can't remember the specifics. I don't know where I came across it, but you were visiting some sort of orca. I don't know what it was. It's not like SeaWorld or something, but it was some sort of orca.
Yeah, it's a little sea land, and it's in Victoria, British Columbia.
Yeah, do you mind telling them the story of what happened there? I just think that this is pretty fascinating. It's pretty connected to what you're saying.
Okay. I had just spent 1 month, me and my students had just spent 1 month with the last 2 orcas ever captured in Puget Sound.
Okay.
There was a chance that they might go to an aquarium, but the people protested vehemently, led by the students at Evergreen State College. And they were pretty much eco freaks, which is good in this sense. But anyway, we had just spent this month with these 2 orcas who were then finally released from a cove on San Juan Island. And these guys tried to track them, and they couldn't. The orcas were smart enough to lose them very quickly, as they would when they did. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I walked into this aquarium in Victoria, right across the way from the strait, where I'd been with the 2 orcas on San Juan Island. And the show had already started. The orca was at the head of the pool, and the trainer was having him open his jaws to show all his 50 conical teeth to the audience. There were 300 people standing in a huge circle around the pool, and there was no place for me to even fit in. So I went to the very end of the pool and squeezed in between 2 people with my camera. The orca at that time had broke out of his routine, swam the end of the length of the pool, came up out of the water, and squirt a fine spray of water over my face. Then he went back and continued his usual program. When the show was over, his trainer came up to me and said, do you know him? I said, no, sir, it's the first time I've been here. Why'd you do that? He said, because he's never done anything like that before. Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, I spent enough time with orcas now. I spent years with them, actually. Though that orca knew somehow, I don't know how to tell you how they know, but that he knew psychically that I had great love and affection for orcas. He knew that without looking at me. He knew that before I even had eye contact with him. He knew that somehow. He knew that being he felt coming in here was friendly to his kind. And he acknowledged it by coming down and spraying that fine bit of water over my face.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And like the trainer said, he's never done that before. Well, he'd never done it before because he didn't have somebody come in with feeling all that great affection for orca whales that I had that day in my heart.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I love
so
that
sensitive.
I love that he asked if you knew him. It's my favorite part about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, because being a trainer, that's why he would ask that question.
Sure. Yeah.
Thinking, well, he must know him,
Oh yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Knew me, but absolutely.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, they've been my teachers too. They're phenomenal. They're just absolutely beautiful and wonderful.
No, that's neat. It says a lot about sort of the energy that you exude, Randall. A lot of that connection with nature and the respect, gratitude, and appreciation for it. So that's pretty amazing. Yeah. I sense it for what it's worth through your writings. It's pretty cool to see an orca do the same in many ways.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Randall, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I can't tell you how appreciative I am and my listeners are, and love to.
Elijah, I want to say something to you, if it's all right.
Yeah, of course.
I commend you for your interest. I commend you for your understanding and for your perception and the breadth of your understanding. And I think you're onto something here, and I hope that you pursue it. And I hope I can help you pursue it, and I will do all I can to do so. And that is to find ways to make it tempting and workable for adult males to get out and get connected with nature and go through an adult rite of passage that connects them profoundly to the earth and to all that lives.
Well, that's awesome. Like I said, I'm honored with you saying that. I'm deeply appreciative of that. Thank you. Thank you, folks, for listening. If you'd like to see more of these types of interviews, just let me know down in the comments. If you're interested in reading Dr. Eaton's book, From Boys to Men of Heart, Hunting as a Rite of Passage, you'll find that link down in the description. Until next time, please consider supporting my work on Patreon or buying some gear for the Modern Frontier at the Man vs. History Outfitter Shop. Thank you, folks. Before I go, I also want to make sure that I thank my Patreon patrons. Special thank you to my gold tier patrons, The Innocents, Tyler Bioshock Rodriguez, Ashley Gertensen, Hurtin Wade, Man vs. Moose, Bryce V. Cyber, Montgomery Johnson, Gavin Abernathy, Will S. Baker, Joshua Vale, Rich Christensen, Comrade Krieger, Epic Dale, Dawson E. Song Breezes, Noah Ovens, David Perkins, Sneaky Ninja, Noah 5943, John Gall, Jigsaw, Your Pal Mitch, Sam Scott, Old Hog Nose, Coco Rockout, Occam's Ghost, and Reese Yearby. Also want to make sure that I thank my silver and bronze tier patrons. Thank you all for your ongoing support. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Got a lot of awesome content coming down the pipe. It's going to be a good time.